welcome to a very special episode of the Fantasy Football Joker. Merci, bonjour, salut la visite. C'est la Journee St-Jean-Baptiste. Yes, that's right. It is Journee St-Jean Day. I don't even know really how to say it in English because it doesn't exist in English. It is a Quebec holiday. And it is like our version, I guess, of like Canada Day or 4th of July. All I know is it's a party tonight, and we are coming at you with some big news tonight. To start with, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. You know it helps the algorithm. Make sure that you are following me on Twitter at Jack Lusney, the Fantasy Football Joker at Jack Lusney on YouTube. And make sure you are checking out fantasyfootballadviceforum.com where you can get all my exclusive articles. There'll be one dropping probably tomorrow. And you can get all kinds of exclusive content there. There's all kinds of podcasts, great community of writers and hosts over there, but also just like a great community of fans. So make sure that you join. It's only $2.99 a month. That is nothing. And if you want, you can also sign up for the year for only $28, which is an even bigger discount. So make sure that you step on over there and check it out. I am absolutely hyped today because the major announcement that I have, you probably have already seen it on my Twitter, but I have made it into the Scott Fish Bowl tournament. So I will be, I already selected 1.6 in the Dominoes. There was only 2 other spots left. So if you are one of the lucky people able to make it in, I would definitely go and join the Fantasy Joker in the Dominoes League if you're able to get one of those spots, or you can always grab one of the 1.6 in any of the other like draft leagues, and then you can find me in the group chat on Twitter for the 1.6. So very excited, obviously, about the Scott Fish Bowl. I've done Megalo Bowl tournaments before. I've done some of the other tournament style stuff before, but this will be my first time in the Scott Fish Bowl. So feeling very official for the Fantasy Football Joker today. And in honor of the Scott Fish Bowl, I'll be dropping my Superflex rankings. So I just quickly jotted down my top 20 Superflex quarterbacks, and we're just going to get right into it. That's what we're going to do today. So obviously, number 1 is the current GOAT. I mean, now that Brady is retired, I guess we can just say he is the current GOAT going. It is Mahomes. I don't really have much to say here. He's greater than the sum of his parts, and he still has Travis Kelce. So as long as that stays the same with him and Andy Reid working together, I don't see any reason why Mahomes would not be the number 1 quarterback. The only thing that could happen really is that he's overtaken by number 2, Josh Allen. Obviously, Josh Allen is able to get it done with his legs just as much as with his arms, because with his big rumbling body, nobody can stop him. And so if he's able to catapult into like getting to that passing tier close to Mahomes, like if he can do 4,040 but also have his upside of the rushing and maintain that, then obviously in that situation that would make him the number 1 fantasy quarterback. He would likely slightly edge out Mahomes in that situation, but you're talking about the 1A and 1B of fantasy football here. That takes us to number 3. It's Jalen Hurts. So I think it's funny that Lamar Jackson gets all this hate for missing games, and yet that's exactly what Jalen Hurts did last year. He wasn't there for you in your fantasy championship when you needed him most. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, though, Jalen Hurts was tremendous last year. They have that goal line offense that can't be stopped. They even tried to change the rules for it. They were unsuccessful. I think it was the NFL Association or like the ownership collective was trying to change the butt push rule at the 1 yard line. So that did not go through. Jalen Hurts will be able to do that. And so I don't see any reason for him not to repeat his rushing prowess. And he still has a good amount of room to improve in the passing game. He has A.J. Brown as a monster target. He has Devonta Smith as a backup target. He has Dallas Goedert. And also they improved on defense and just like across the board. So I think they're going to win the division again. I think they have the potential to make a run at the Super Bowl in a weakened NFC. So I really love the Eagles this year, and that's why I've got Hurts at number 3 because of the rushing edge. Coming in at number 4 and 5, you can basically flip-flop them for me. It's just like which one is left on the board a little bit later, and that's the one I'll take. And so usually it ends up being my number 5. So we'll get to that in a second. But at number 4, I have Joe Burrow. I just love, obviously, the team there. And if anything should happen to Joe Mixon, they'll be more reliant even on the pass than they already are. So I think that, obviously, Joe Burrow is well situated in Cincinnati there. He's ensconced, as they would say, as the starter forever, basically, until he retires. So love Burrow. Number 5, I would have Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, I really think this year, he's my most drafted quarterback right now in best ball. I've been taking tons of him in even Dynasty. I love him in redraft. I think he's a lock this year, barring injuries again, for 5,000 yards. They kept basically the same offense that he succeeded with already, but then added Quentin Johnston. I love the addition of Kellen Moore as offensive coordinator. I think that's really going to help this team. So I prefer Herbert, technically speaking, to Burrow. But, like, obviously, if Herbert went and I had to take Burrow, I wouldn't be upset about it. They are very much in the same tier for me. Coming in at number 6, I have Lamar. Now that he has re-signed his extension, I think Lamar, obviously, again, barring injuries, because the last 2 seasons, they struggled with not only a stale offense that was too reliant on the rush, but and also just like refused to stock up on wide receiver. I think I like what they've done. You get Rashad Bateman back from injury. You add Zay Flowers. So you have a little bit of a 1-2 punch, at least at wide receiver. You get Mark Andrews back. You get the running game going a little bit. You get Lamar Jackson going. So I do like him to have a bounce back season. Maybe not right to his former MVP glory, but I think he can play 16 and be a top 5 quarterback this year, maybe creep in, depending on how things shake out with the rest of these guys. At number 7, I have Trevor Lawrence. I love T-Law this year. Very big on T-Law. If basically in every best ball draft where I haven't drafted in that tier of Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, I've reached a couple times for Burrow because I happen to have gotten Chase or Higgins and I want to complete that stack. But in almost all the situations where I did not get either of those guys, I've been grabbing Trevor Lawrence a couple rounds later, because to me that is really the last elite quarterback where I don't have any questions about his role in the offense, his future in the offense is set. And so it makes me feel comfortable. And I also see him having a really great season this year. They've added Calvin Ridley. Now, I believe Calvin Ridley will struggle with rust as he makes his way back after 2 years off. But that doesn't affect Trevor Lawrence. At the end of the day, the more targets that you have in an offense always benefits the quarterback, because the quarterback, generally speaking, is like greater than the sum of the parts. Meaning that, you look at, we'll get to him a little bit later, but Daniel Jones with a million slot receivers, if 7 slot receivers get 500 yards apiece, that's 3,500 yards. So that's great for a quarterback, maybe not great for owning any of those individual wide receivers. So with Trevor Lawrence, I do really love Christian Kirk though, and I think Calvin Ridley will struggle a little bit. I do think towards the end of the season he can start to put up some better numbers, but I do think there'll be some rust there. But I love the rest of this team. I love Christian Kirk. I love the spot starter Zay Jones. I love ETN out of the backfield. I love that they added depth with Tank Bigsby and Evan Ingram. I said it before and I'll say it again. I think my favorite stack right now for quarterback tight end, because that's where you're finding the value and they're going much later, is Trevor Lawrence and Evan Ingram. So coming in at 8, I have Justin Fields. Fields concerns me. Obviously, we saw that he has insane rushing talent, but he put up basically historic numbers. And so if those numbers were to regress and his passing numbers don't progress by like a large amount, then he's going to basically have a worse season than he did last year. It's not to say he won't have value, but he's being drafted a little high for me. I think it's because of the rushing upside, obviously, but I think the quarterback that I have at number 9, Dak Prescott, is a much more consistent week-to-week player, where Justin Fields is going to give you those spike weeks, but on the weeks where he bombs, that could tank your week. It's just because, if we're already getting reports that Chase Claypool isn't really working out, so it's going to essentially hinge on DJ Moore and Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet and not much else. So we'll see how that offense looks. They've kind of got a muddled three-headed thing going on in the backfield there. What's that dog called? Cerberus, I think. The three-headed dog. With Deontay Foreman, Roshan Johnson, and Khalil Herbert, and none of those are really pass catchers. So Fields really concerns me from a pass catching level. That's why I have him after all of the other, what I call elite quarterbacks. And then right after I have Dak, like I mentioned, who's a much more consistent product, but I hate what they're doing with that offense. I hate Mike McCarthy, and that they brought in Brian Schottenheimer, who's honestly never really had a successful offense in the NFL. He also is like weirdly insistent on running the ball, like to death, like to the point where it almost hurts your team, and it's not creative and it's not helping. Very much a 3 yards in a cloud of dust offense doesn't work, because that's 9 yards and you're punting the ball because you only got 9 yards and you really can't trust your offense. It's just doesn't make a lot of sense. Tua comes in at number 10. For me, this is strictly health concerns. Honestly, I wish I could put Tua higher on this list. I would put him above, because of the weapons, honestly, I would even put him above Trevor Lawrence, just by a little tick. Not that I think again, I'm not saying Tua is anywhere near talented the quarterback that Trevor Lawrence is. If you switch them positions, honestly, Trevor Lawrence, you could argue he's right up there at number 3, in between Hurts and Burrow. But no, it's really just like, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, they added Devon Achane. If that works out, that's just, I think that team could be just lightning in a bottle. So that's one that I really like. But obviously with the concussions, that's always a concern. At number 11, we have he who shall not be named, Deshaun Watson. So this one, I'm taking the leap of faith. I think like most fantasy managers are, that last year was essentially rust. And, it's kind of what I'm predicting for Calvin Ridley, is that when you take 2 years off of football, no matter how much you're working out in the off season, no matter how much you think you're good in training camp and preseason, once you get to those like real life games, it's different. And it takes a while, I think, to adjust and to get back into the flow and the rhythm. And so having now gone through last season, and again, now going through an entire off-season program, going through training camp, and, they've added pieces to the offense in Elijah Moore. And I like what they've done overall. They're still going to be relying on Nick Chubb as the main rusher, which I love. I think Chubb is a premier running back in the NFL. He's one of the few true 3-down volume running backs. I know he doesn't really do a lot of in the receiving game. I don't think it's that he can't. I think it's just they don't really need him to, because he's just so good at pounding the rock. So if Deshaun Watson returns to form, I mean, he was at one point top 5 NFL quarterback. So I think that's what people are relying on. At number 12 is Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones. It's not a sexy pick, but it might be my favorite pick. If you are still in the old mantra of waiting on quarterback, I think Daniel Jones might be your guy, and I love him in best ball. I've taken Daniel Jones as my quarterback too in best ball in as many leagues as I can. Especially if I took Darren Waller, who is going as I think the tight end 8. That's an easy stack that I love. But the reason I love Daniel Jones is because everyone, every fantasy expert will tell you about the hack of rushing quarterbacks. And, you don't think of Danny Dimes as a rushing quarterback, but you look at, they unlocked last year his running ability, and he had 708 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. Forget what he did as a passer. And in Brian Dable's offense, obviously going into his second year, finally getting some continuity on offense in terms of the offensive coordinator and the head coach, and a successful offensive scheme finally in his career. I really think Daniel Jones could continue to progress. Now, I'm not saying he's going to have, 4,040, but if he has a nice little 3,500 yard season with 30 touchdowns and just repeats those same rushing numbers, that's going to make him a top 10 quarterback. And he's going outside of the top 10 right now. That makes him a tremendous value in my eyes. And I think in best ball, where you don't have to predict those games where he's going to pop off for those large runs, I think that's just an absolute win, especially if you took someone like Herbert, who you look at last year, the whole team suffered injuries. He suffered injuries, and they're bringing back Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, aren't exactly known for their health. So if in a lot of the drafts where I took Justin Herbert, I wanted to make sure that I double tapped Danny Dimes as my second quarterback, because I think that just presents a tremendous value. And in Superflex leagues, all day, like Daniel Jones is my second quarterback. I love that. So continuing on with number 13, Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is, again, it's a boring choice, but it's the right choice. All he does is throw for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. It's what he does basically every single year of his career since he took over as a starter, even back in the old Washington days. And this year they just let go of Dalvin Cook, and they're going to rely on Alexander Madison and Ty Chandler and whoever else. I can't pronounce or remember his name. I know there's another guy that they like there in the backfield. But honestly, Kirk Cousins is coming off a year where he had a career high in pass attempts, and I don't see any reason for that not to repeat. So obviously Kirk Cousins is going to be a great value this year again, just like he always is. Even though the Detroit Lions did all the work in the world just to basically move sideways, I still like Jared Goff at number 14. Derek Carr, another boring choice. I like him at number 15, just as like a solid quarterback too that I can rely on, that I think will get 3,500 to 4,000 yards, and maybe like 25 to 30 touchdowns. I'm not counting on him to be my main guy, but as a quarterback too, he's a reliable week-to-week option. You look at what Andy Dalton did for that offense, I think he can be better. And then now we're getting into like some dicey options. Anthony Richardson, I think obviously is going to be given the chance to start. And it's going to be reliant not on his arm, but on his legs. It's going to be on his rushing talent. They're not a lot of pass catching options even really outside of Michael Pittman and the rookie from last year, Alex Pierce. And then they took Josh. It's just like a whole muddled thing in Indianapolis. I'm not really sure what to make of that team. I think they're going to be very run heavy. But that could benefit Anthony Richardson as a rushing quarterback. So I think that he is definitely Someone that I would be willing to take the bet on, but he's going pretty high. I have him ranked much lower, so I don't have. Oh, I think I have almost no. I have no shares of him in any drafts because he's going so much higher than I'm willing to take him. Especially because look at right after I have Jordan Love, who I think if you look at just history, based on history, he's going to be a good starting NFL quarterback for the next couple of years, and he could progress into actually being like an excellent NFL quarterback. But at least for this year, I like his upside. They drafted another wide receiver. Unfortunately, it wasn't Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I was really hoping they were going to take really high, almost despite Aaron Rodgers. But they ended up taking Jaden Reed. So you add Jaden Reed to Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs. They took a couple tight ends. They still have Aaron Jones, who's a pass-catching running back. So, I think it's like an underrated skill set, a group of skill players. And Jordan Love has some rushing ability that is underrated, similar to Daniel Jones. So, obviously, there's a big unknown factor. That's why I have him ranked where he is. But he's someone that I like taking late. And I especially like taking him as like a quarterback 3 who can develop into a quarterback 2. And if I see that, okay, well, now I've got my, Jordan Love has developed into like a real thing, and I can now trade that second quarterback to fill a hole elsewhere on my roster, because starting quarterbacks in Superflex you can sell for literal gold. So that's just one of those things where when you're getting down to those nitty gritty rounds and there's not a lot of great skill players left, you might want to start taking a look at a guy like Jordan Love, who, especially in a dynasty Superflex, now I'm talking about the Scott Fishbowl, so that's a redraft, but like in a dynasty format even higher, but like in the redraft ones, I still like him this year. I like him to just have a nice little season. Right after that, I have Aaron Rodgers. I'm less convinced that Aaron Rodgers is just going to walk in and be the savior for the Jets. I'm a little concerned about their wide receivers outside of Garrett Wilson, obviously, who's an incredible talent. But then you look at the rest of the wide receivers that they're going to be relying on, and it's going to be Alan Lazard, and they brought in Randall Cobb, and you have Corey Davis, and then you have Tyler Conklin. We'll see if Breece Hall is able to work his way back earlier rather than later. I'm not really counting on having him available before week 6. And even then, he's similarly to what we saw with J.K. Dobbins. I think it's going to take a while for him to work his way back to also 100%. And then, so that actually makes me really like, I'll talk about him later but I really love Michael Carter this year, and I think Abanaconda is a nice little value too. But Aaron Rodgers, I have him ranked a little bit lower because this is, again, like a Superflex redraft. I'm particularly not that interested because also, the division that he plays in with the Dolphins and the Patriots and the Bills, like that's kind of underrated as like 3 tough defenses that he's going to have to face 6 times in a year. And then you look at if he ends up having to face some of those other AFC teams that have killer defense, it has me a little worried about the Jets' outcome. They could definitely end up being a bushfire this season if things don't kind of work out perfectly for them. And I'm rooting for the Jets. I've said this before. I always kind of root for them as a dark horse team because of my love for host of Around the NFL, Dan Hansis. So I'm hoping that it's a successful run for Rodgers and the Jets, but I'm not counting on it for fantasy football, that's for sure. And then last but not least, it's Russell Wilson. And, these are 2 where it's like, honestly, if you told me you wanted to take Bryce Young and CJ Stroud instead of Rodgers and Russ because you're just tired of them, I get it. Again, in a single year, I don't know that I'm wanting to rely on the rookie quarterbacks versus the veterans. Russ obviously has Sean Payton coming in to save the day. We'll see if that really makes a difference, but most of the offense that people were enamored with last year is still there. So if ifs and buts could build a kingdom. And we'll see if Sean Payton can build that kingdom for Russell Wilson. But that's why I kind of snuck him in at the end there. And then, like I mentioned, some honorables: Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud. And then I want to talk Sam Darnold. I think he could potentially actually end up being the starter for the San Francisco 49ers. I know people think he's a bust, but he's a bust because he was drafted to the New York Jets at a time when they were atrocious. And then he went to the Panthers, struggled on a pretty bad to mediocre team that was, struggling obviously with injuries as well with Christian McCaffrey. And, he still did pretty good towards the end of the year. And now all of a sudden he finds himself on a Shanahan offense. And it's like the other guys are working their way back from injury. So we'll see what he can do. And Will Levis, reports are he's already in camp battles with Malik Willis, so that does not strike me as any type of good news for Will Levis truthers. So, Levis versus Willis to me equals Ryan Tannehill starting for another year. So that's what I've got for my Superflex rankings in honor of the Scott Fishbowl, which I am very honored to be a part of this year. So I hope that you all are joining contest and doing what you can. I jumped on a live stream at the last minute that I wasn't supposed to be on, really, and made a couple good guesses of some other people's picks, and I won a spot in basically like a giveaway contest. So, be active on Twitter, look for contests and participate, and, sometimes you don't get in, and just keep that to yourself. Nobody... I get it where it's hard, like you want to go pour your soul out and be like, I've tried everything and I didn't get in and da-da-da. It's like, honestly, the energy, I always say karmically, not comically, karma, what goes around comes around kind of thing. The energy you put out in the world will come back to you. And that's something I struggle with because I can be a very pessimist, negative person in my regular day-to-day life. And I'm trying to, that's one of those things that I work on that I'm trying to change about myself. And so, like I said, just try and stay positive. That's one of those things, especially online, there's so much negativity and it just doesn't really lead to anything. It leads to more negativity and more bickering. I find, when you come at it, what's the old saying? If you want to attract flies, you get more flies with sugar than you do with salt. So, sweeten up. That's all I can say. Okay, let's knock out a couple sleepers and get ourselves on our way to going to sleep. That was the lamest joke I think I've ever made in my whole entire life. But I'm keeping it in because I'm rolling with the punches here. So obviously we'll skip quarterbacks because I just did a whole Superflex ranking. So I will just go right into a couple running backs that I wanted to talk about that I've been picking up late. For the purposes of this discussion, primarily, this has been for best ball, specifically on Underdog, where I've been doing a lot of my best ball, well, not a lot, where I've exclusively been doing my best ball drafting, because I just like the app and its ease of access for me, because I'm up in Quebec, Canada. So, I've been taking a lot of Michael Carter, and I guess you could also count Israel Abanikanda, who, honestly, I love taking him just for the name value alone. Abanikanda don't want none unless you got buns, hun. That's right. I love Abanikanda, but I love Michael Carter more. Michael Carter is the real sleeper here, and let me tell you why. Because he's the pass-catching running back. Even when Breece Hall comes back, which obviously Breece Hall is a 3-down running back, that's why he's such an amazing talent. Michael Carter is going to retain a role, I believe, and part of that role, the primary part of that role is going to be as the pass catcher for this team. And when you look at what Aaron Rodgers has done over his career with pass catching running backs. Obviously, case in point, Aaron Jones, which we saw most recently. I think Michael Carter is a super sneaky value, especially in best ball leagues where you don't have to be guessing when you're going to put him in, but also even just as a regular flex option in redraft and dynasty leagues. I love him because he goes so late. He's unnoticed basically, but go look. He's had 40 receptions essentially the last 2 years. So those are the kind of things when you're down into those late last rounds, you look for a path essentially for a player to be able to get on the field. And with Michael Carter, like I mentioned before, I think Breece Hall could take time to get back. And even when he does get back, could take time to get back to 100%. And so when you look at the type of player that Michael Carter is versus the type of player that Abanaconda is, who's more of like a true thumper type, more like a Damian Harris, I really love the value of Michael Carter. And if that number for receptions surpasses 60, you bet that he's going to be noticed by the fantasy community. And so this is the time to get on him before everyone is wise to the act. Another person that I love is Devin Singletary. I always thought Singletary kind of got shafted in Buffalo, where they just, for some reason, didn't want to rely on him due to his size. But I like his playing style. I think he's just like a really good, solid running back. And when you look at the backfield in Houston, I don't think Dameon Pierce is just like, he's not Arian Foster that just has this backfield on lock here. He had a nice rookie season. But ultimately, they've reset this entire franchise, and they signed Devin Singletary because they like him and they're going to use him. I honestly prefer drafting Devin Singletary to Dameon Pierce, because where you're having to draft Dameon Pierce, you're having to pass on startable assets like a Brandon Ayuk, like a Miles Sanders. And honestly, it could end up just as easily being Devin Singletary, who's going much, much later. And so I just like taking that late shot on him. And then Deuce Vaughn. I think if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, this is a little bit of a homer pick. I'm not a Cowboys fan, but I think similarly to what we saw last year on Hard Knocks with Jamal Williams, and how those type of heart players can carry over in real life and can translate into fantasy production, like we saw with Jamal Williams. And because of the way that they want to use that offense, even though his size is extremely questionable, I think Deuce Vaughn, who is the son of, I think it's like the lead scouting guy for the Dallas Cowboys or something. Anyways, Deuce Vaughn is an electric player, and I think that he could essentially replace Pollard's role in that offense, with Pollard having to take on more of a lead role in order to replace Zeke. So you have Pollard replacing Zeke, and now you're having to find someone to replace Pollard, and I think potentially that could be Deuce Vaughn, and you're getting him basically in the last rounds of drafts. And so if he does anything at all, it's just kind of a bonus. I like taking him as like a little, running back 4 or 5 with some upside. And the last one is Deontay Foreman, because everyone seems to think that Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson are just going to walk away with his job. And they might between the 20s, but they signed Deontay Foreman for a reason. And I think Foreman is built to be a red zone back, and I think that's exactly how they're going to use him. So in terms of pure touchdown upside, in best ball, again, just as like a 4th or 5th running back, love to tap him at the end of my drafts. For wide receivers, I'm still hooked on a Thielen. Maybe I'm just old school, but I love Adam Thielen. I like that he went to the Panthers. I don't really see another receiving option. Obviously, they took the rookie Mingo, who is like supposed to be like a DK Metcalf light. But obviously, rookie wide receivers take time to get acclimated to the NFL. Bryce Young is going to need someone to throw to, especially in the red zone. That's kind of Thielen's thing. It would not shock me at all for Thielen to have 808. I don't want to have to predict what those games are going to be, but that's why I love him in best ball formats. I've taken him as my wide receiver 4 or 5 in as many drafts as possible because he just feels like a nice, easy, safe option, especially once it's down to those rounds. He's basically the only starting wide receiver in town that isn't like completely terrifying like a Robert Woods, who's technically the starting wide receiver for Houston. I also love Hunter Renfrow. Renfrow's just being left for dead. He's been like a PPR darling, but he got injured last year, and now people are acting like he completely fell off the face of the earth, even though Darren Waller left that team and left a huge target vacuum in place. Everyone always talks about how rookie tight ends struggle, so it's not like Michael Mayer is just going to walk in and overtake the spot completely. I agree that Jimmy G is a downgrade at quarterback, but he's not useless. So, Hunter Renfrow, you're getting him essentially for free in the last rounds of your draft. This is a startable, he's essentially like the wide receiver 2 for this team. And I think that he's just kind of being forgotten about. He's a little bit of a boring pick. But, I like those. I tend to take a little bit more upside picks earlier. I like to take guys like Christian Watson and Drake London and these like sophomore breakouts, Treylon Burks, those kind of players. But if those sophomore players don't work out, one way that you can kind of mitigate the risk of taking high upside players who potentially have a bit of lower floors is you can take these kind of safer picks that, maybe it's not the sexy home run pick at the end of the draft, but he might get you 5 for 50 and one on a week where you really need it, and that actually helps your team more than, the week that Buddy got a long touchdown but you didn't actually need it, because these types of players tend to be, even though it's not sexy production, it's more consistent week to week production that at the end of the year when you look up and you're like, how did this guy end up with 800 yards and 7-8 touchdowns? That's how. And then a couple, again, just late flyers. I like Khalil Shakir. He could emerge as the slot receiver, competing essentially now with Dalton Kincaid, who's a hybrid tight end / slot receiver himself. So we'll see what happens there. But all it takes is an injury, and then I think Khalil Shakir's role could emerge a little bit more, and we've seen him pop and flash in the past. So again, in a late best ball format, I like to take him. And Van Jefferson was basically emerging as the wide receiver 2 before he got injured. And then Stafford got injured, Kupp got injured. They basically shut the whole team down last year. So if he can continue to progress from where he was progressing, then as like a late wide receiver where you're getting him basically for free, he can emerge as a nice value in best ball leagues. And then we'll just quickly close it out. I'm just going to not spend too long here on tight ends. Dalton Schultz, somebody's got to catch balls in Houston. I think he could end up being the lead target guy. It might not be a lot of touchdowns, but it should be a lot of targets, catches, and hopefully yards, and maybe a couple touchdowns here and there. And, maybe you get lucky. I like Gerald Everett. I don't want to have to predict his games, but he's usually good for 505. If you're waiting on tight ends and you're doing a little stack at the end of 2 to 3 tight ends, I like adding Gerald Everett to that mix, especially if you took Justin Herbert. That's a nice little stack. Normally, I am not the one to be like, rookie tight ends are going to produce for fantasy, but I'm very big on Sam Laporta. It's partly that I've watched his tape and I really like the way that he plays. I really like the offense that he fell into, obviously, with Jared Goff and the Lions. He's walking into a completely open role where the only person in front of him essentially is Brock Wright. Jameson Williams is suspended for 6 weeks, so he could potentially be relied on earlier. And if he starts to see like a consistent week-to-week target share of 7-8 targets, that could again evolve into something towards the end of the year. He could end up having a really nice rookie season, and I like to pair him. So with Laporta, he's going so late that if I took a Mark Andrews early, if I took a tight end that I don't really feel like I need too many backups for, then I'll grab a Laporta just to be like, okay, well, he might take longer to acclimate to this season, but then by the end of the season, he could be giving me some production. And then Chig. I think that's everyone in the talent fantasy community right now. Their favorite tight end talent, sophomore breakout sleeper guy is Chig Okonkwo. So, I'll let everybody else talk about him, but obviously I like him too. I'm not dumb. So I have my shares of Chig just like everybody else. He could emerge easily as the second target in that offense that is desperate for some kind of talent at the skill position to emerge, like in the receiving game. Barring unless obviously they sign DeAndre Hopkins, but I actually don't think Nuke is going there. I think Nuke's trying to win a championship. And I don't know that he sees Ryan Tannehill on essentially his last year, because like I had mentioned earlier with Will Levis competing, so to speak, with Malik Willis. The fact that they're competing at all to me means like, okay, well, neither of them is ready, and so it's going to be Ryan Tannehill again for another year, barring injury. So those are my sleepers right now that I've been grabbing at the end of all my best ball drafts. I've been grabbing them also. A couple of my dynasty drafts, I'll just take flyers on these guys late. Some of the younger ones, especially. I'm really high on Michael Carter. If there's one name from this whole list that I can impart upon you, it's Michael Carter. Michael Carter. Michael Carter. I really think he is going to develop a connection with Aaron Rodgers. He is a true pass-catching running back. He does remind me a little bit of like a skinnier Austin Eckler almost. Not that I don't see Michael Carter as ever being a guy that's gonna like run between the 20s and get you touchdown volume upside from a rushing perspective the way that Austin Eckler can, but from a receiving aspect, I definitely believe that with Aaron Rodgers at the helm, he could be a sneaky candidate for 70 receptions. So if he gets 60, 70 receptions, he is going to be of value in fantasy football this year. So to close it out, I just wanted to say a very special thank you, first and foremost, to Aaron St-Denis, who in honor of Saint-Jean, I'm going to pronounce it Saint-Denis. That's how it's pronounced in Quebec. But I'm joking, it's pronounced however he wants it. Aaron St-Denis, well known as at FF Mad Scientist on Twitter. Make sure you go check out his content. I have appeared as a guest on one of his shows, and I will be appearing in the near future again. So make sure you check that out. So very special thank you to Aaron St-Denis for inviting me on his show, which is where I was able to get my Scott Fishbowl entry, which I'm super happy about. So obviously, huge shout out to Scott Fish at ScottFish24 and Ryan McDowell at RyanMC23. Just for all the work they do in the background, everything they do to run the contest in the first place. So I'm just honored to even be included this year. So I'm super jazzed, super excited. And then the other guys that were on the show with me, with the FF Mad Scientist, make sure that you follow at Dylan's Sports. Don't forget the S in there. That's DYLANS Sports 1. I'll make sure that they're written somewhere in here around. And then make sure that you also follow. So that's at Dylan's Sports 1, at Dynasty Drew FF, and at Ryan's Pros _FF. And then, as always, make sure you follow your boy. Twitter, YouTube, at Jack Lusney. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe on the YouTube channel. That always helps tremendously, obviously. And make sure that you check out at FF Advice Forum and fantasyfootballadviceforum.com. We're building a great community over there. There's new content dropping all the time. There's new people joining the site all the time. There's new stuff happening literally all the time. So don't have fear of missing out. It's only $2.99 a month. That's nothing. And you can even just get it over with. Sign up for a year. It's only $28. That is 2 trips to Starbucks these days. So please make sure that you go over there and sign up. And comme je t'ai dit, joyeux Saint-Jean, mot t'as dit tabarnak, esti, merci, salut la visite.